Greetings, our Frederick Riddle here with another Becoming a Published Author is Fun. If you don't understand that title, just simply go to episode 8, not 25-8, but 8, and it explains to you why it's called fun. But we are today in episode 2520, and today we're looking at have a plan. Now, I've looked at different aspects of getting started in the business, and this is just another continuing step that you may not know how to get started. You may not, or you may need a refresher on some of the ideas that you can explore and might be useful to you as you go forward. Now, these are not necessarily absolutes, and I will probably refer to the fact that you have some options there. But these are some general practices that you can use now. So let's get started with the theme. Now the theme, sometimes we use the theme along with the word plot, but it actually includes the plot, the character, and then the storyline, which quite often might be part of the plot, but I'm breaking it down a little bit further there. So we're going to look at the theme here. So you've been called to be a Christian writer of fiction, maybe a Christian writer of Christian fiction. There's a slight difference there. We won't get into that a whole lot right now, but just to make sure that once you understand that whichever way you've been called, this applies to you. Now, either way, you have a call from God to be a writer, and you are now ready to begin. However, you need a plan. And so that is where we are starting out. And it consists of the three parts I've just mentioned here. First of all, the theme. Now, basically, the theme is your overall view, and may or may not change as you go forward in your story. It's really up to you. Usually my theme stays constant because when I write the theme out, I have in mind different steps. Now, if there's some big time changes, I might have to go back and redo it. But basically, the theme is an overview from the distance, and so you're seeing the whole thing work out, and that's something that you can do if you have like a murder mystery or any kind of a mystery rather. You might want to be more specific on your theme and have to go back and refer to it because you're going to be dropping clues and stuff like that. So you want to know your theme is right on. But part of the theme is your plot. Like I said before, sometimes people use the word theme and plot interchangeably, but there is a slight difference. For one thing is that while this stays constant usually, this usually evolves. Now, you want to just have a plot that sits out there and it never changes, that's your option. But ideally, you want your plot to evolve. Now, you can do it one or two ways. You can write it out, or you can just keep it up here. I've done it both ways. This is probably the best way. But you can do it mentally. If you've been writing a story, you go away from it and come back. As soon as you start writing, a lot of people who are writers, it doesn't take much to get that right back into the plot again. But the plot starts out with your basic theme, and which we're gone of the plot, but I mean it starts out here. And it could be as small as a couple sentences or much more. So that's really what we're still talking about here is the theme at this point. A couple sentences or more. But as it develops and becomes your plot, it can really add up. And again, it depends upon how interactive you want that to be. So it can be much, much, much more than just a couple of sentences. So as you write your story, bits and pieces are included in the plot. Think of it as a summary. It tells you where you have been, who is part of the story, and their roles and the direction of or storyline that you are following. So it's like I said, it's evolving. You can go back. Say you, if you if you're getting to the point where you're actually writing several stories, this can become a good way of keeping track of the different stories because you don't want to be writing one book and having the characters or the plot suddenly transform over to the other story. So you want to keep them separate and be on spot. So, but just as we're just talking right now about a single book, and so the idea here is that you want to have follow that storyline. You want your storyline. It's going to be talk about this evolving. Your storyline is your actual story that you're writing, and as it flows out, and you don't want to have to rewrite the plot word for word of the story. That's totally unnecessary, and it defeats the whole purpose anyhow. The plot is like think of the plot as a outline that reflects the story, and it's a guide. Um, so if it diverts from the actual story, you may have a problem. Either the story has departed from the original plot by accident or by purpose, because you might be writing along there, and as the more you write, you're going to find that your characters and your storyline kind of take over, and sometimes they take you in a different direction than you planned. And if you don't keep the plot in tune with the actual story, then there's a diversion there. And then once that takes place, if you don't correct it, it no longer is offering you a reliable guide. So if you're going to use the plot as your guide, which I do recommend you do, then you need to, if there's a twist or a turn in the story, put that twist or turn in your plot so that the two are right on. So the purpose of the plot of having that plot is, like I said before, is to act as your guide. Um, it's to think of it, if you want to put it in perspective, the plot takes the theme and it develops it along, and it's reflecting the storyline that you are telling. So it is not required, by the way, to keep an updated plot. If you want to, just leave it the way it is when you first start out. That is fine. That is your but you're going to have something in your mind. If you don't have it written down, you're going to need to do it because now I don't know about all the other word processes, but in Microsoft Word, if you shut down later on when you bring it back up and bring that particular document up, it will tell you, well, you can go right back to where you left off, and you click on it and it'll take you right to there. And that's a great thing, a great tool. But you may not have that ability, or maybe you want to go somewhere else in the story, and so that's not always a tool that's going to be usable for you. But the thing is, your plot, you go to your plot, and that will refresh your mind of where you've been doing, what you've been doing, and where you're going, and it'll enable you to go in and update your story itself. So we have the theme, we have the plot. Plots are made up of a lot of things. Your characters are part of that. Now I could go on here and talk about the characters. I could talk about the geography, the layout, all sorts of different areas that you can include in your plot. The more you include, the more accurate that plot is going to reflect your storyline. But the thing is, I'm focusing on characters is because characters can carry your story. They're a very important part of it. And one of the things that I teach is to not, there's a way, let's see, how does this go? You show, not tell. your reader what's going on. And by that I mean, when I first got started in writing, what I would do is I used prose. My prose was, I was fascinated with my prose. And I would describe how beautiful the mountains were, their fields and so forth. And I described the action, and I described the conversations and so forth going on. But the reader never gets involved with the totally involves the story if you do it that way. Somewhere along the line, I learned a very valuable truth: to show, not tell. And by that, I simply mean I go in and let the characters carry the story. For instance, say it's a mountain, and you have characters, and they're seeing those mountains. And as the author, my prose comes into play, and I describe how beautiful that is. Here's a different way of doing it: the character thinks it, or tells it, or in the discussion they're having with one another, it reflects the beauty that they are seeing. Now you're seeing through their eyes. Now you're experiencing it. So instead of saying showing, let them experience what you want them to see, what you want them to know. And when you do it that way, it just brings it and makes the whole thing alive. So one of the things about characters is you need to have a list. I don't know anywhere around this that you need to have a list. I've tried it, going without a list, and I always end up having to have a list, because the more characters you have, the harder it is to keep track of them. So you need a list of your characters. It's almost a requirement. If you choose to go without that list, fine. More power to you, but I think you're going to end up doing a list. I have found that to keep any characters consistent, and I'm talking about one character, for instance, keeping that character consistent needs to have you need to have that character's biography, if you want to think of it, in that list. Because let's say this: you have a character, didn't ever graduate from even high school. Maybe they have a ninth grade, or maybe even only a fifth grade education. And somewhere in the story, your character starts sounding more like a college professor than somebody with only a fifth grade education. Now you might say, well, so what? Because the so what is your reader will catch it. You may not catch it, but your reader will, and they're going to start, what's going on here? Then they might even go back and check and say, when did he get so smart? Why is he using words like that when he couldn't even spell them before? Now he's speaking them. And so you need to keep your characters on spot. And if they do become a college professor, you need to show what happens. Somehow in there, you as the reader needs to be able to say, oh, okay, maybe that person got GED and finished, was able to finish school, and then maybe went to college and developed, and all these things happened. That happens in real life, so it can happen in your story. But you have to tell the reader that, let the reader see it and experience it, so that they don't start tripping over the character's education, the character's personality, or even the character's physical description. If you don't keep them the same, the reader is going to really wonder, and they may eventually put that book aside, because it's hard for them to follow and to stick with it and keep their interest alive. So this list should contain all pertinent information about each character. So when I make up a list, I give things saying they're physical. What about their hair, their eyes, their lips, their ears, their entire facial? How about their build? Slim, heavy set, tall, short, skin color, even your eye color. Now you can change, eye colors can change because they got those little lenses they can put in their eyes. But if they do that in your story, you need to somehow if it's like, say, a mystery, That could be a puzzle for the detective, for instance, until they suddenly realize, oh, they're wearing these lenses with different colored lenses that change the color of the eye. Oh, now the reader sees that and says, oh, okay, now I understand. So you want to keep that stuff up to date. You want to their skills, age, of course, also maybe even the education they've had, um, if they're in the military or in some position in life, what that position is. The more information you can include, the more that reader is going to understand. And you don't want to be having to have it in one spot in your story. If you try to put all that information right up front when you first introduce the character, that could stop the reader right there. Let them develop it, some basics, and then add as you go along. So this should be referenced so that you, the writer, the author, don't get the characters mixed up. Um, that's very easy to do. You have three characters, and Tom, Dick, and Harry, and you get Tom over here and Harry over here, and all of a sudden some of Harry's features or characteristics end up over here with Tom, and Dick, and you get Dick over here, some of his characters with Harry. Now they're going to have similarities anyhow, but the thing is, you want to keep them separate, consistent. So it should be to the point where, say the character is a redhead, at least at the beginning of the story. So later on in the story, maybe you reference that character and say, the redhead. Or maybe somebody comments about his red hair or her red hair. Well, you want the reader to suddenly, oh yeah, that's this character here. And so that way again, you're keeping your information consistent, in line, and something that doesn't create a bump in the road, but actually smooths the road out, and the reader is able to follow these twists and turns and bumps that may appear, but they've got the information that smooths it all out. Now, I said there might be some more, and that more is right here, the story. Now, there's more than just a storyline, but this is the other part of it, because it really relates to the plot. So, I recommend track your storyline. And that's taking the plot one step further, and here you have the theme, the characters, different places, and so forth. Here's the actual story, not the actual storyline. There is a difference between a storyline and the story. The story is what your reader is, what you're writing, and what the reader is going to read. The storyline, you can think of that as the flow of the story, the direction of the story, how it unfolds, and things of this nature. And if you're doing music and you have some of the software out there, it shows all the like that, how the music goes. Well, let's think of it in that way. Your storyline is taking it up and down, and instead of just being a straight line. And you as the reader, not you, but the reader actually follows it along like that and never loses their place. If you're doing this and they lose their place, the chances are they're going to have to go back. And I've done that. I've had to go back and see where somebody else had written a book, and I'd be reading it and whoa, wait a minute. And I would stop and go back, oh, okay, and then I'd go forward. A lot of readers are not going to be that patient. You're going to get, especially if you do that too often, more than once. And I'm not even sure once might be too many, but yeah, anything more than once, that can be a very big problem. And so that is basically what we have here is for your plan. Have a theme. Make sure that theme, that you understand what that theme is. And most likely that's going to stay firm. You're not going to change it. But the plot can be just like the theme, but why have it if you're just going to be the same as the theme? You want it to grow as the story itself, as the storyline unfolds, as the story itself unfolds. And so you want that. You want characters. You don't bring all your characters in at one time. You might feed characters into your story as it goes along. And you always, and before the reader sees a characteristic being played out back here and toward the story, you want to start providing information that will, when they're out here, they will remember, oh yeah, this person knew shorthand, and that's how come they can read shorthand here, or why they can do this or that. You need to lay, it's just like a mystery in a sense. You're laying clues, but instead of solving a mystery, you're laying clues for them to be able to follow the story. And then you have your storyline itself. Like I said, it's like the flow. And that is something that they're not going to follow. They're not going to be looking at any of these separately like you are. They're going to be following the story that you have written. And if you've done this part right, that story is going to flow, going to capture their interest. You have to capture their interest right away. Usually, and this is a little bit additional free thing. I was once told to get a nugget of information from any meeting you go to, and you get one nugget, then that was a successful meeting. Now I've given you several nuggets here, but here's one more nugget. If, when you're starting the book, if the reader picks up something, action, some kind of action taking place at the very beginning, first paragraph, first sentence, right at the very beginning, but that really grabs them. I teach you how to do that in my course, but that right here, I'm just letting you know, if you can put something up there front, not a daydream, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a scene that might take place later on in your book. You take a portion of that scene and put it in the front of the book. You capture that, and then you go into the backstory. By capturing it there at the beginning, you're getting, the idea is to capture the interest of the reader. One story I remember reading starts out, I don't know, remember the character's name. We'll just say his name is Boris. And Boris was on flight such and such, didn't realize that he only had 15 minutes before he would die. Wow. And it wasn't, and then after that, it got into the backstory. It wasn't much more than just that one sentence. There may have been a couple more sentences after it, but that very first sentence caught my attention. What's this about? In the story, Boris does die 15 minutes later. He's not a main character, but at the very beginning, he is. He's the one that captures your attention. He serves his purpose. He captures your attention, and now you're into the story. And so that is something you want to, you can experiment with. Different events. It could be an event. It could be any kind of a mystery. It could be any kind of event, any kind of action that takes place in your story that you think will grab their attention and create a interest in the story. Now, if you create now you gotta be careful. If you put something up here that's an action like that, and then it's not carried out later on in the story, you're gonna have one disappointed reader, and they'll never buy another book of yours. So you got to be careful. It's a very powerful tool, but if misused, it can be disaster. So that's it for today. Have a plan. Have a theme, your plot, your characters, and your storyline. And if you do all those things, you are going to have a good chance of having a book that is readable and enjoyable. You have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.